Maybe some of you saw a documentary this past week on the life of President Kennedy. Here was a man who was brought up in a religious background, but had never been taught this fundamental lesson. Consequently, although he rose to the highest position in the land and was looked upon by millions as a shining example of achievement, it was all a sad facade. He remained a slave to his own passions, placing the nation that he led in jeopardy as the result, and was unable or unwilling to break their power until the day he died. It's a sad illustration. Now, we're called upon to die to self and choose Christ. And that's not an easy thing, because the flesh is weak and its demands are strong. But unless we obey, we cannot bear fruit. Fruit doesn't come from the soul. It doesn't come from the feelings and the emotions and the will. It comes from Jesus Christ. And that's the only source. Verse 27. Now is my soul troubled. He doesn't say my spirit is troubled. He says my soul is troubled. My feelings are troubled. The man in me is troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this cause came I unto this hour. I'd like to ask him to save me from it. But that's why I came. I came to die. Jesus knew where he was headed, and anticipation of that ordeal filled him with dread. Once again, the same word, psyche, is used here, soul. His spirit was serene, but his soul was troubled. His emotions and desires revolted at the thought of what was to come. Don't ever let anybody give you the impression that all there was to the cross was the physical agony. Many people were crucified. Just imagine the agony of having the sins of the whole world from the time of Adam until the end of the age lowered upon you when you knew no sin, and having the God of whom you were part stand away from you and leave you alone on that terrible cross. That was what brought the agony, not just the pain. Probably, I'm sure he had the same feelings as any of us, probably more intense, because his emotions were not hindered by sin. So he was probably more alert than we are. But his spirit ruled, not his soul, and he was willing to disregard his preferences in order to carry out the Father's will. Praise God, he did. Verse 28. Father, glorify thy name. Then there came a voice from heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. The people therefore who stood by and heard it said that it thundered. Others said, an angel spoke to him. Jesus answered and said, this voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. The voice of God was not clear to the ears of those who stood by, but they sensed that the sound was more than some natural disturbance. Apparently Jesus knew what the voice said, or John would not be able to tell us, would he? Somebody had to know. The name of God had been glorified many times in the Old Testament, of course, in Egypt, in the wilderness, at the Jordan River, at Jericho, in the Temple of Solomon, and so on. God had manifested his power in the sight of his people. The ministry of Jesus had glorified his name again. Jesus had consistently pointed people to the Father as the power behind his teaching, his healing, and his life in general. God's name would again be glorified at the resurrection of Jesus. And then during the apostolic times and throughout the church age from time to time, culminating in the final events of this age when he would come in glory. God is glorifying himself and has done all the way through. Now verse 31, now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. Jesus was referring to the cross, of course. This world is characterized by sin. At the cross, sin was judged and paid for. At the same time, Satan's power was neutralized. The prince of this world, as Jesus called him here, held the world in bondage because of man's sin. Do you realize that the ace card of Satan has not been any power vested in him, but it's actually vested in the perfect justice of God? That's where his power came from. Satan's power came from the justice of God. He said, in effect, God is too holy to look upon sin. I have managed to make man sin. Therefore, man must be cut off from God, and the justice of God must ensure that. And he was right. That's exactly what it was. But Satan overlooked the ability of God to overcome those problems. When God became a perfect man, untainted by sin, and then personally took upon himself sin's penalty, Satan's ace card was rendered useless. No longer had any power. And Satan could no longer appeal to it for his authority. So the prince of the world was indeed cast out when Jesus died at Calvary. Verse 32. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. The people answered him, We have heard out of the law that Christ abides forever. Now sayest thou, the Son of Man must be lifted up. Who is this Son of Man? See, the term lifted up was evidently understood by the people as meaning crucifixion. They'd seen it going on all the time under the Romans. And this didn't fit with their picture of the promised Messiah. They were looking for a king who would set up his throne and deliver them from Roman occupation. Dying certainly didn't play a part in that. Had they meditated on Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22, then they might have understood. But as it was, the Lord's words fell as cold water on their excitement. He was a king, and he would reign, but not in the physical sense for another 2,000 years. Physical and spiritual terms sound so similar to the human ear, don't they? And yet there's such an enormous gap between their meanings. Left to himself, man seems incapable of thinking on anything but the physical dimension, wavelength, and consequently much of what Jesus said went and still goes uncomprehended. Verse 35. Then Jesus said to them, Yet a little while is the light with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he who walks in darkness knows not whither he goes. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may be children of light. The analogy of light, of course, is a major theme in the Lord's ministry. John used it to introduce this gospel, didn't he? He said, In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And then Jesus himself used the picture in John 3 when he spoke to Nicodemus. He said, This is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, but men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. And then in John 8 and John 9, he used it again. But here the thrust is just a little different. Notice the progression of thought in verses 35 and 36. First, he said, light was with them. Second, he said that they were to walk in the light. Third, he said that they should believe in the light. And then fourth, they were to become children of the light. And that still is the way it should be. The light is with us. It's with us at all times. It's available to every one of us. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. He who believes in me shall not walk in darkness. But just because light is available, it doesn't mean that we're making use of it. The light can actually be embarrassing. It can show up things that we would rather remain hidden. But if we're wise, we'll walk in the light and we'll follow along the path it leads. If we'll do that, then the next two steps are more or less inevitable. First, we will believe. Can't walk in the light very long before you recognize that it's true and desirable. And finally, having believed, we become children of the light. It's a natural progression. Being adopted into the spiritual family of God, becoming his children and his heirs, is the automatic result of believing. Believe in Jesus Christ and he does the rest. You don't have to say, well, I've believed, now how can I get adopted? I better fill out this form in triplicate and apply. No, you believe and the rest of it's done for you. It's automatic. Finally for today, the end of verse 36. These things spoke Jesus and departed and hid himself from them. As we've seen before, Jesus had an incredible ability to disengage himself at will from the crowd, where normal people could not have done that. In Luke 4:29, it's always amazing to me, where the Jews in Nazareth were angry with him because he pointed out that God blessed the Gentiles as well as the Jews. It says that they rose up and they thrust him out of the city and led him unto the brow of a hill whereon their city was built, that they might cast him down headlong. But he passed through the midst of them and went his way. Neat. I'd like to be able to do that. He was always in control. He was ever patient, ever loving, but in control just the same. And he still is. The world is a mess, isn't it? And without a strong faith in Jesus Christ, we have every reason to be alarmed. But if we're trusting in him, we can have peace. Because he knows where he's going. He knows where he's taking us. He makes no mistakes. Nothing catches him by surprise. And if we belong to him, then we're safe. Oh, things might happen, but I will not fear what men will do to me, because I will be able to say, the Lord is my helper. He is with me. Can you say that this morning? I trust you can. You trusted him, you've walked in the light, you've believed in the light, you've become a child of the light, and therefore you're safe. No matter what happens in this world, you belong to him. This program is brought to you each week at this time by Seed Time Ministries, a non-profit organization designed to encourage you in your faith. We trust that you found today's Bible study helpful. If you have access to a computer, visit us on our website at www.seedtime.net. There you'll find details of this ministry and information to help you with your Bible study. And now until this same time next week, this is Ashley Day saying goodbye and God bless you.
You're listening to Radio Pan Am. Brought to you by Pan American Broadcasting, when your ministry has to make an impact. If you enjoyed today's broadcast, please email us at info@panambc.com. Again, that's info@panambc.com. For more information, visit our website, panamericanbroadcasting.com.